And hello, everyone. This is your friend Michael Stewart welcoming you to another everyday money management segment. I'm completing tip number 2, which will be the final part of the series, the value of a family financial review. That is what I had been covering. If you've had an opportunity to see the previous two uh, videos where I talked about some money management tips. Well, this is part 3 of tip number 2, the value of a family financial review. Now, in this video session, I will be wrapping up the family financial review series by discussing the remaining review considerations. So we're going to be looking at including in our family financial review our banks, securities, other investments, charitable contributions, family business if there is one, and last but not least, wills. But before I jump into the meat of what I will be discussing today, I'd like to first read this disclaimer notice in your hearing. In accordance with the Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 107, the information expressed in this video series is shared without profit to those who have expressed a prior interest in receiving the included information for research and educational purposes. If you wish to use copyrighted material from this video series for purposes of your own that go beyond the fair use, you must obtain permission from the copyright owner. So with that being done and out of the way, let's jump right into our money management family review tip number 2 as it relates to adding your bank to your list of items that you should review. So most people today have a checking account. Some have a savings account as well with their bank or their credit union. As a part of your household family financial review, you would want to remember to include a list of all your checking accounts. That would be yours as well as your spouse or lifetime partner. So if you want a true picture of what your finances for your household looks like, then you would want to include both account information. Don't leave out your regular and your time deposit savings accounts. Like, I have mine set up to where on every 2 weeks, I have a designated amount that is automatically pulled from my primary checking account and that goes into one of my several savings accounts. And so that is actually my rainy day or my cushion account for those events that come up unannounced, and I pull from there. And I have that set up where it automatically does that. So you want to make sure that you're factoring that in when you are building your list and you get to this portion where you're including your banking information. And then you want to ask yourself, does your spouse or your life partner have access to your banking information? So while you want to include those regular and time deposit savings account information, you also want to make sure that you put on your list the contents of your safe deposit box if you have one of these. Some people have gotten away from using safe deposit boxes with their banks, but there are some that still do. So if you happen to be one that has a safe deposit box with your bank or your credit union, then you would want to answer the question, does your spouse or your lifetime partner also have access to your safe deposit box, and vice versa? Now, a special note here that I want to express. At death, and I know nobody likes to talk about death, it's a very uncomfortable conversation, but at death, a person's assets uh, for tax and probate purposes are immediately frozen. So when a person dies, all of their assets and their whatever monies they have in the bank, whatever securities they have, whatever properties they own, all of that freezes. And this is for tax and probate purposes. And that time frame can be long. And so you need to be aware of that. It's equally important that your survivor have enough funds to operate without having to depend on what you have left in your banking accounts, because all that's going to be frozen. So they should have some functional funds available to them. Many couples share a joint banking account, and that's fine if you do. But for those who are not on the account with their spouse or their life partner, it is a good rule of thumb to have a bank account in your own name. Now, I'm not talking about doing things covertly or secretly without the other knowing what you're doing or what have you. But, for these purposes, it is a good practice to have your own bank account. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, why that's a good practice. Some people, they store their will or wills if they have, if both parties have one. They store their life insurance policies and other important documents like their mortgage statements and their title loan statements. They store these items as well in their safe deposit boxes. And generally, these things will become needed immediately following a death. And so it may not be a good thing to put them in your safe deposit box. And I'll tell you the reason why. Uh, when death occurs and whatever items you have in your safe deposit box with your bank or your credit union, it creates some hurdles, because here's what happens. Your safe deposit boxes are immediately sealed by the bank at the owner's death. And so it's going to take some time for that process to complete itself, where they will remove the seal and allow you to have access to that box. So that's one of the primary reasons why it's not a good practice to put your will, your life insurance policies, and other documents that are going to be needed immediately upon the death of a loved one in your safe deposit box. There's other places you can safely put those items. So now let's talk a little bit about securities. Now you may say, well, what exactly are securities? Well, you want to take inventory of all of the stocks that you may own, any bonds that you have, any commodity, futures contracts that you may have, treasury notes, if I don't know if you're still holding on to treasury notes, and any other securities that you may be holding. These are investment products. And so if you have any of these, you want to take inventory of what you have. You don't want to wait till the last minute and then try to start doing this. This is a good time to do it. You're in good health. Things are going pretty good for you. You're in your right mind. You're sound of thought. This is the time to start really putting things in place. Some would say, get your house in order. But this is what they are implying when they say get your house in order. You will want to show exactly where these assets are being held. Nowadays, most of which you can now conduct this type of business online without having to physically go into a broker's office. You can now do everything online. So whatever online platform you're using, you want to be able to list that and what you have with that particular brokerage firm. Okay, so you want to show exactly where the assets are being held. You want to identify those that are jointly owned. So not only are you listing your own investment securities, but you want to also list those securities that are jointly owned by you and your spouse or your life partner. And it wouldn't hurt. It would not hurt to revisit your records for accuracy and up-to-date information for tax purposes. Every so often you should do that. That should already be a practice where you are staying abreast of how your investments may affect your tax filing status. So every now and then you want to review that just to make sure that it's accurate and that it's up to date. And you want to be mindful of the dates that you've acquired securities, the dates that you've traded some securities, dates that you've purchased or sold them. You want to keep track of that. Now, a lot of these companies, they're doing that for you, but it doesn't hurt to go in like every month. What I do at the end of the month before the new month rolls, well, after the new month rolls in, I go back into my back office and I actually will pull out and save to a thumb drive the previous month's statement of transactions. So I have a record of it as well as the online platform that I use. You never know, your internet might go out and you can't get to it. You may not have access to a computer. All kinds of things can get in the way and slow your progress. So that's why I do that. I save it to a thumb drive, and that way I have a available copy for me. And if you have investments, or if you have an investment broker who's been managing your portfolios for you, you'll want to also note those persons or that person's name as well. Okay, and it's good. That's good information to have written down somewhere as you're building this financial review list. Now, let's talk a little bit about other investments. Now, for any investments that have not already been covered by the previous listing up to this point, you want to follow the same review pattern with any investments in real estate. So if you have properties that you have as rental properties, or if you are in the business of investing in real estate properties and flipping it for profit, you want to make sure that you're keeping accurate records of those transactions as well. So you want it to follow the same review pattern. Now, this is other than your own home. Remember, in the first tip, the first video, we talked about your home and its value and the equity that's built up in your home. So here, we're not talking about your home. We're talking about real estate properties that you have invested in, that these are investment properties for you. Okay, and they may be revenue generating properties. So you want to make sure you have accurate records of those, and that should go on your list. You should also add to this section of your list as other investments, any gems or precious metals or art objects. Excuse me, my tongue is sticking to the roof of my mouth. Excuse me for a moment. Let me take a sip. Non-alcoholic beverage here. Okay. All right, that's a little better now. So yes, so you do want to include any gems, precious metals, or art objects that you have in your possession as investment items. These are things that can be liquidated. Okay, so and rather quickly as well. Now, you also want to include in your list of your family financial review any charitable contributions. Now, you want to consider reappraising your current list of charitable recipients if you have those. I know some people have actually put that in their will. What portion of their assets they want to be donated to a charitable organization. Some people have several charitable organizations that they contribute to on a regular basis every month, or sometimes twice out of the year, or annually. You want to list those. You want to list them by name. You want to also identify who the recipients are, and you want to be able to answer the question, should you die, would your spouse or your life partner or even your estate be held liable to continue honoring those pledges or commitments that you made while you were alive? And so some people don't think about that. They don't think about what happens after they are dead and gone. And as I stated, when we're talking about death, that's not a comfortable conversation for most people. And so the tendency to avoid answering the hard to talk about questions, that happens, right? So you want to, your planning should involve answering those hard to talk about questions, is what I'm trying to say here. Now, if you own a family business, whether you are operating that business as a sole proprietor or you have a family business and you are considered to be the principal in a partnership, or you have a private corporation where you're the principal in that private corporation, you would want to have a plan in action or a plan in place that will immediately go into effect when death does occur. And so that's a very unfortunate position to be in, is when your survivors are trying to figure out what to do with the business and do they have the means to keep it going. So now I realize, like I stated, I realized, because now I'm talking about death. In the previous two videos, I didn't mention anything about death. Now in this video, we're talking a little bit about death and planning for that. So you have to realize that, death is not a comfortable conversation for most people, and I understand that, but you should have a plan in place. And this is where people fail to plan. You should have a plan in place, and that plan should be one that is possibly funded by a adequate life insurance policy. Now, in this series, I'm not going to get into the different types of insurance products that one can have to further fund their business after their death. But it is important to at least make note that you should have, or it would be good for your business to be funded by some type of a life insurance policy, so that when you do die, your expenses are taken care of, those who are surviving you are taken care of, and should the business continue on, that it would be able to fund what is going to be needed to keep the business going, to find a suitable replacement, a person of equal skill set and knowledge that you had when you started the business and was running it. That it costs money to hire new people, hire the right people for that matter, get them trained properly, unless you're just going to sell the business, right? And that's a long process. So that's why it's good to have a life insurance policy that will pretty much fund what's going to be necessary to satisfy the needs of the business. Now, a carefully structured exit plan would have such a plan in place that would provide life benefits to your survivor and protect your survivor's share of the business if the business is jointly owned. So there are policies that you can get, that the business can actually obtain on your behalf as the principal person in the business. So when you die, now the business has a policy in place that will fund the business to find someone to replace you to keep the business going. Okay. If the business is jointly earned, that way all of the financial liability does not fall on the surviving partner of the business, because that's a huge undertaking. And so you would want to have something in place to cover that. Now, in the case of a sole proprietorship, you can designate that the insurance proceeds would allow time to liquidate or sell the business, perhaps to the employees or to an interested party. You see, so those are things that you can get with your financial advisor. You can have that conversation. It certainly wouldn't hurt to have that conversation, while you're in good health, while you do have a sound mind. it wouldn't hurt to get those things in place, have a plan in place before, a demise meets you. Yeah, just as sure as you're breathing, one day, we're going to die. That's just a reality, it's going to happen. So you want to make sure that you got your ducks in a row and that you got a good plan in place to help alleviate some of the frustration, some of the stress that is associated with trying to pull everything together following the death of a loved one. That is a very difficult time for many people. There's so many different steps involved in finalizing everything, and so you want to have a plan in place. And then last but not least is a will. This final item probably carries more weight, in my humble opinion, than all of the other very important listings. Now, each of the items that I've mentioned throughout the series, they are all of equal importance, or they are all important, period. They are. But this one here, like I said, in my humble opinion, when it comes down to having a will or not having a will, that baffles me. It does. I come across persons practically every day who tell me that they don't have a will in place should they die. And not only do they not have a will, but a lot of them don't even think or feel that a will is important enough for them to have one. It's not on their level of priority. For some, they feel that they could do without. Oftentimes I get feedback where folks say things like, "Well, when I die, I'm dead. I'm gone. I ain't got to worry about that." Or some people would just say, "I don't have anything, so what do I need with a will?" Well, to be perfectly honest, if you have $1, $1, I know that sounds ridiculous. I mean, but if you have a little bit of change, somebody wants it. Somebody in the family wants it. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Family, when a family member dies, before the funeral arrangements are finalized, family members are already having that conversation about who's going to get what. And I mean, it could be a collection of dolls. It could be a model car selection. It could be clothing. It could be pocketbooks. It could be shoes. Family members are already having that discussion on who's going to get what and who wants what and why I feel I should get this and no, I don't think you ought to get that. And it becomes a mess. It does. Now, granted, the loved one that has died and gone on, they don't have to worry about that. But, it's not a good thing, for family members to be fighting over material things after a loved one has died. But that's just the way it is, that's just the way it is. People will fight over these things because they feel that there is some sense of right to those items. And so a will clears all that up. That's what even if you don't have a whole lot, you got something. People like to convince themselves that they don't have nothing of value. You may not perceive it as of great value while you are living, but after you are dead and gone, you've got some family members that to them, it is of great value. Number one, because it was yours. And secondly, because they are connected to you through a bloodline. And third, they want it. So, it's just not a good enough reason when I hear people say, "Oh, I don't have nothing." Not a good enough reason not to have a will in place. So honestly, like I said, this kind of thinking, it baffles me. It does. Simply put, if you die without a will in place, here's what happens. any and all assets that you do own become frozen, and they are then put in probate. So there is a window of time where all of your assets cannot be accessed by anyone in that window of time. And then it's put in probate. Now, this is where the courts get involved. Okay. And so when there's no will in place, this results in the courts or your state determining what to do with your assets. They will decide who gets what and who doesn't get what. And sometimes that can be an ugly fight. Sometimes that leaves people with some feelings of animosity and hostility towards family members, and of course towards the courts, because they feel the courts weren't just or weren't fair in their decision, and it just becomes one big mess. And so when there's no will in place, this is what you have to look forward to, or what your family now has to look forward to. A larger amount of your estate, then, in the absence of a will, a greater amount of your estate goes to the state to satisfy the probate and the estate costs, because now there are probate taxes that come due, there are fees that come due. Whereas if you had a will in place and you had a good exit plan, and you had one that is funded by a good solid insurance policy, those things could be taken care of, through those vehicles. And then what is left, your will, would be the determining factor of who gets what, because it's your last will. I mean, it's your will, it's your instructions of how you want your assets to be distributed amongst your loved ones. So it's good to have it in place. Now, you should have a will, and so should your spouse or your life partner. You both should have a will, and it should be revised periodically to reflect any changes in family circumstances. Now, I know for some people that might be a bit cumbersome for them. I'm not talking about minor changes. We're talking about major changes in family. It could be a beneficiary of the will passed on before you did. So you would want to revisit your will, update it to reflect that change, because certainly your assets can't go to that person unless you want it to go to their estate. Then you would have to revisit your will and indicate that in your will that such assets should go to this estate, on behalf of this person. And then you have to have, of course, the estate has to have an executor of that estate that manages what's in the estate. Okay. And so where there's changes in family circumstances, and those changes can be economic changes, or they can be personal changes. But, periodically you should. In fact, I'm coming up on time to review mine. As I'm doing this video, it's coming up on time for me to review my will and make sure that it is current with the state of my family, my state of the economics of my family, and any personal reservations that I may have, right? So you want to do that. You should also review your will with every change to the tax laws. And those changes are often every year, sometimes multiple times throughout a year, the tax laws change. I know with this new administration from the previous administration, many middle-class earners were faring kind of well. We're on a road of economic recovery. And then under this new administration, there were some immediate changes to the tax laws that adversely affected many of middle-class earners, especially new homeowners. Many folks who were getting refund checks at the end of the tax year found themselves owing thousands of dollars, and they really hadn't done anything different. And they were like, well, how did that happen? What happened? When did it happen? Well, this new administration enacted some tax law changes that had an adverse effect, had a very adverse effect. Whereas you may have itemized your deductions as a homeowner, as a business owner operating a small business from your home. There was so many credits that was available to you, and then you found that those credits did not, when you added everything up, it did not amount to the increased standard deduction. That was one of the changes. They raised the threshold of the standard deduction. Now, on the front end, that sounded really good. And there's other factors that do come into play, like how did you have taxes withdrawn from your pay throughout the year? You know, that's where your W-4 comes in play. If you opted to take all of the available exemptions that were available to you throughout the year, essentially what you told your employer is that, hey, go ahead and let IRS know I need as much of my money as I earned as possible, and I'll hit them up at the end of the year, you know. And so that way your check is larger because you took all of the available exemptions. But then when it was time for you to go file your taxes, and let's say you have a family of 3, let's use that number as an example. You are a family of 3, but your W-4 form, based on the calculations and the worksheets that you do, allowed you to take 5 exemptions or 4 exemptions. But then when it comes time for you to file your taxes, you can only take exemptions for 3. So that simply means that you did not have enough taxes throughout the year withheld from your pay. And so now you're going to be paying the IRS some additional tax monies. Well, when they raised the threshold up to where they raised it up to, that further affected many of middle income earners, to where now it was like their tax liability tripled, you know. And so that's why you want to stay on top of those changes. When these tax law changes go into effect, you want to stay on top of that, and then you want to revisit your will and make sure that your will is in step with these changes as well. So that pretty much wraps up the Family Financial Review series. So we talked about, in this last video here, we talked about adding our bank information, our securities information, and other investment information, charitable contributions, and family business information, and having a will. These were the final items to wrap up this series of the Family Financial Review. Now, I hope that if you have not seen the first 2 videos, that you would go back and you would listen to those videos, because they build up to this last video of the series. I hope that you find the information enlightening and useful. Certainly, if you did, I would ask that you would hit the thumbs up button. Of course, you know, hitting the thumbs up button helps the algorithms to let them know on the back end of their, you know, what they do, that people actually like your video, they're watching your videos. And, you know, some people open the video, see about 30 seconds of it, and then just pop out of it because they're not interested. And that's fine. You know, that's fine. But, you know, really trying to help some people, really trying to put some useful information out. And so if you found it useful, certainly I ask that you do hit the thumbs up button. If you're watching this on Facebook, click like, because that helps the algorithms there as well, so that more people can see it. And if you're not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, I ask that you hit the subscribe and hit the bell, and you'll be notified whenever I put up new content. Same thing with if you're watching this on Facebook, and I ask that you would just simply, you know, like the page, and just stay in the loop. Stay in the loop. If you have topics of suggestion that you want to pass by me, certainly I am open to that. I'm open to any feedback. Just keep it respectful, please. I claim not to be anyone's expert, just trying to help some folks out where I think I can. If you can add to the discussion, you can add to the conversation. Certainly, there's a platform for you to do so, and I encourage it. I encourage the feedback. I encourage your input. I encourage your thoughts, and so together we help each other. And so, again, thank you so much for viewing this series. If you've watched it, thank you for viewing this video. It's been my pleasure. The next one that I will be doing here, don't know the exact date, but I'm going to do a series on management of family spending. Management of family spending. You know, with the way things are going right now in the economy, the uncertainties, the up and down movement of the stock market has really gotten a lot of people nervous and afraid to invest. There's just so much going on. Folks are needing jobs and what have you. People are forced to change careers. You know, so many uncertainties, but yet one thing is a constant, and we know it to be true. Folks are still spending money. Despite all of that's going on, despite all of the challenges and the struggles and what have you, people are still spending their money. And so in the next series, I want to deal with management of family spending. Management of family spending. That should be an interesting series as well. So it's been my pleasure. Again, this is yours truly, your friend, Michael God Energy Stewart, and it has been my pleasure to offer to you today's final segment of the Family Finance Review. Do enjoy the rest of your weekend, enjoy the rest of your day, depending on when you are watching this video. And as I always say in closing, be blessed, peace be to you, stay safe, continue to practice social distancing. Much love.